Remember what it was like to be a kid? To explore and play. To roam free all day. In Jamestown, North Carolina, we get out of the grind and escape into the moment. People feel good here. Let loose here. Eat well here. Feel swell here. We go for a ride or an afternoon stroll. We cheer each other on. And go for the goal. Here, a treasured history meets the energy of a town on the rise. In a place with true heart and soul, and where we have our own special beat. Jamestown, North Carolina, where history and possibility meet.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Wolf.
Here.
Councilmember Capes.
Here.
Mayor Montgomery.
Here.
Councilmember Strawn.
Here.
Councilmember Rayburn.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please bow your heads for a moment of silence. Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to welcome each of you to our October the 11th special called meeting. At this time, please silence your cell phones. If you've not joined us in the past, I'd like to take a moment to explain how this process will work. Tonight, we will have several public hearings. A public hearing is a formal proceeding held to receive testimony from all interested parties on a proposed issue or action. As such, the meeting will follow a set of rules. Everyone is going to be having an equal opportunity to be heard, and please be respectful of one another by adhering to these rules. Those interested in providing comments will be allowed to do so at the appropriate time. No replies will be provided to comments, as this is your opportunity to address the council. I will remind everyone that our staff and our council have been and will continue to be available to meet with anyone interested in having a discussion about this proposal outside of this formal public hearing. We will be hearing from several speakers, then I will open the floor for public comment. At that time, if you wish to speak, please come to the podium, state your name and your address, and you will be addressing the council, not the audience or another speaker. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Once the timer sounds, I'd ask for you to please complete your comments. Once all comments have been heard, I will ask the council to deliberate on what they have heard. In the course of their discussion, the council may ask speakers to clarify their comments by asking the speaker to return to the podium. All comments must be made from the podium in order for everyone in attendance, both in person and online, to be able to hear. We appreciate your attendance tonight and look forward to a productive meeting. Anna, would you please begin with the first public hearing?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. This public hearing was opened on the November 16th, 2021 regular meeting. Under General Statute 160A31, the town received a petition for the annexation for the properties located at 2221 Guilford College Road, 5300 Mackey Road, 2207 Guilford College Road, and 5303 Mackey Road. As I've mentioned in the past hearings, the three public hearings on this agenda, the annexation, rezoning, and development agreement, are all very much dependent on each other. Because of this, the majority of discussion and presentation from staff will occur during the first item on the agenda, annexation. As you remember from the last council meeting, this hearing was continued until tonight's special called meeting in order to give the public hearing the time, attention, and public input that it obviously needs and deserves. With that said, I'd like to give an overview of the staff report that's included in your agenda packets. This is case 2021-02. The location, you may notice, has changed a little since the beginning of this process. No additional parcels have been added, no additional land has been added. Guilford County has simply ungrouped what was originally grouped, so there's some new numbers. Those are indicated with the red asterisks. The proposed rezoning is from agricultural to planned unit development. It's approximately 467 acres per their survey. There is a condition that a development agreement be approved concurrently with council review of the rezoning request. There is an overlay district in this area. Portions of the site are subject to a scenic corridor overlay district. That is the Gateway Scenic Corridor. It runs the length of Guilford College Road from Mackey to Westgate City Boulevard. This overlay was established to protect the views and open space that provide a sense of arrival for residents and visitors along the major entrance road to the town. This corridor maintains an undisturbed 50-foot buffer from the edge of the highway right-of-way. That is in our LDO already. It is staying there, so just want to make sure everyone's clear. The applicant request is a rezoning from agricultural, ag, to planned unit development, PUD. The reason for the request is given in the application from our applicant is as follows. This rezoning request is being made to develop a high-quality master planned community. The proposed plan includes numerous housing types, site features, and uses not permitted in the agricultural district. On November 8th, 2021, the Planning Board unanimously recommended the approval of the rezoning application to Town Council. Subject to the site-specific master development plan submitted to Planning Board shall be approved by Town Council. 2, a development agreement shall be approved by Town Council. We're going to get into that tonight. 3, the permitted residential density will be determined by Town Council as part of the site-specific master development plan and subject to the development agreement. And 4, any variance in signage from the LDO standards shall be approved by Town Council and subject to the development agreement. So to get into this, what is a PUD? Our land development ordinance defines it as follows. An area of land under unified ownership or control to be developed and improved as a single entity under a unified development plan in accordance with and subject to the requirements of this ordinance, which is about as clear as mud, or clear as PUD. So as you look further in the LDO, it's a little clearer. And I've put in bold these main parts that I think are important. The planned unit development district is designed to promote a compatible mix of uses to instigate an integrated and sustainable development consistent with the town's unique character. This district shall also encourage design flexibility, multimodal connectivity between uses, sensitivity to natural resources and environmental features, and facilitate the efficient provisions of infrastructure, utilities, and adequate public facilities. Above all, every PUD established shall demonstrate consistency with the goals and policies established in the Town of Jamestown's Land Development Plan, the comp plan. I'm going to dive into that land development plan, comp plan, Envision Jamestown in a little bit, and what it says about this property. But first, I want to make sure we all know what property we're looking at. So this area in red, which is a little hard on a projector, is the property in question, the Johnson Farm, now D.R. Horton property. It's big. To the left of that image, you'll see Cedarwood. Below, you'll see Whittington Hall, Forestdale East, Forestdale North, Forestdale Town Hall. It's kind of right in the center. To the north, Jordan Creek. And we're going to look at it from some different angles to make sure we're all set. So looking north, at the top of this image is Mackey Road and the Jordan Creek neighborhood. To the left or the west is Cedarwood Community. To the right and the east is Fox Hollow. Looking south, this has Guilford College Road looping around, the Mackey below. And to the right is the Cedarwood neighborhood. Looking east, the top of this image is Fox Hollow. Mackey Road is to the left, Guilford College to the right, with Whittington Hall peeking out here at the bottom. Finally, looking west. So at the top of this image is Guilford College Road. GTCC owns this property here. Whittington Hall neighborhood. To the right of this image is Jordan Creek and the neighborhoods of Bordeaux and Brook Run. Those are in Greensboro. The bottom of this image is Fox Hollow, Adams Farm, and Williamsboro Commons. As you notice, I named a lot of neighborhoods. It affects a lot of people, and we want to make sure this is done right. Now, as I promised, I'm going to get into the comprehensive plan. This is going to go a little out of order from the staff report, but I think it makes a little more sense this way. And I'm going to cover it all. So the Envision Jamestown Comprehensive Plan was adopted in October 2021. Prior to that, the comprehensive plan had been adopted in 2007. It has to be updated regularly, so it's a very normal process, and it was time. The area is identified in the future land use chapter, which is section 3 of the comp plan, as a preliminary growth area. This designation, and I've got it here in this orange square, is based primarily on the availability of developable land, as well as the current use, parcel size, potential assemblage with adjacent development tracts, access to major transportation routes, utility infrastructure, and the nature of adjacent development. The future land use, as defined in the comp plan, is Mackey Guilford. It's this light blue section up here. It's got its own section. It's big. I'm going to read the whole description from the comprehensive plan. I've put up bullet points for those who want to play along, but I'm going to read through it. The Mackey-Guilford future land use classification is applied to the largest single undeveloped property in Jamestown's planning jurisdiction. As one of the premier potential development tracts in the Triad, this property is expected to experience significant development interest in the near future. Given the size and prominent location of this tract, the town is expecting a development plan for the site that is designed in a manner to create an integrated, walkable, and mixed-use neighborhood that contains a wide range of housing options and a central community focal point where residents can easily access neighborhood-scale retail, dining, and service uses within a short walk or bike ride of their homes. With an abundance of land resources, it is expected that the future development of this tract will provide significant amounts of open space for both recreational use and for the preservation of critical habitats that exist on the property. It is also expected that the development of this area will preserve the most important aspects of the historic landscape, connecting the past to the future. The resulting development of the Mackey-Guilford area is expected to yield a complementary and enduring addition to the Jamestown community that respects the history, character, and aesthetic quality of the town. The next section I'm going over from the comprehensive plan is Our community, section 4. This describes kind of the housing and assets of the community. Part of this uses the AAR Livability Index, which defines housing livability by examining housing accessibility, multifamily availability, housing affordability, the cost burden of housing, and subsidized housing. Jamestown, as you see in this image, does poorly in this category, scoring below the national average in most of its peer communities. Particularly note is the indicator that Jamestown scores in the bottom third of the country, housing affordability, cost burden. This is primarily attributed to its high housing values. The town also scores poorly in housing options, as the town is comprised primarily of single-family homes. This indicator has probably slightly increased with the addition of multifamily housing since this last census, with the addition of Millicent, Maine apartments. Housing, section in 4, talks about the 75% of housing units in Jamestown are single-family homes. 25% of the units are multifamily homes. 71% of housing is occupied by its owner. That's in comparison to the Triad region, averages 50 to 59% owner occupancy. Strikingly, 1.6% of all housing units are vacant. Typically, when it's less than 5% of housing stock vacant, it indicates a demand for new housing. Again, this is all from the comp plan, which pulls data from the census and things such as the AARP Livability Index. There's some historic assets on this property. The Futrell Mackey Armstrong House. It is laid out in the development agreement to work with historic preservation organizations to restore and preserve aspects from the on-site historic structures. The guiding principles. So, there's 13 of these. Some are very specific to items that wouldn't apply to a rezoning or annexation, such as downtown Main Street specific or working with partnerships with local governments. So I've gone through everything that is important to this application. Guiding principle 1, Jamestown will actively facilitate high-quality growth that is both compatible with the town's traditional development pattern and innovative in how it meets the needs of the diverse and dynamic community. So part of this, there's a couple bullet points that go under it, and to save you your eyes a little, I'm going to read those to you. Establish objective design standards that achieve the aesthetic and superior construction quality that is expected by the community to enhance value and quality of life. Implement subdivision standards that facilitate growth in a manner that achieves the town's desired urban development pattern and quality of public infrastructure. Avoid the introduction of generic and monotonous development styles, both site development patterns and architecture, that detract from Jamestown's unique sense of place and small-town charm. Guiding principle 2, as the strength of our community is directly tied to the long-term success of our neighborhoods, we will work diligently to promote and maintain the quality of life and aesthetic standards that our residents expect in Jamestown. Prevent the emergence of blighting influences and public nuisances in residential areas through proactive code enforcement. Protect established neighborhoods from encroachment by adjacent incompatible land uses through the appropriate application of zoning regulations. Ensure that Jamestown residents have access to housing that is appropriate for all stages of life and family situations, including housing to allow older residents to age in place. Guiding principle number 4, the ability to safely walk and ride a bicycle throughout the town is critical to maintain our community's high quality of life. We will ensure that our community is well connected with the necessary infrastructure to support walking and biking as an important mode of transportation for all residents. Some of these we've already done. Develop an updated bicycle and pedestrian plan to guide future infrastructure and safety improvements. Provide every neighborhood in Jamestown with connections to a pedestrian system that will allow them to walk safely to any other destination in the community. proactively implement pedestrian and bicycle safety improvements at major intersections and along the town's primary transportation corridors. Ensure that equitable access to pedestrian infrastructure is provided to residents on both sides of the railroad, as well as the eastern and western portions of Main Street. Number 6, every neighborhood in Jamestown will have convenient access to a wide variety of public parks, natural open spaces, and other recreational opportunities that meet the diverse needs, abilities, and desires of our residents. Require the development and dedication of neighborhood parks in conjunction with all new residential development. Establish a green railway trail and water access along the Deep River. Develop neighborhood-scale parks in existing residential areas that lack convenient access to recreational amenities. And ensure that all of Jamestown neighborhoods have a safe pedestrian and bicycle access to local parks. Number 7, the town will continue its tradition of providing cost-effective and efficient public services and high-quality infrastructure that meets the needs and exceeds the expectations of the community. Finalize long-term plans for the collection of solid waste. Ensure that the town has sufficient water and sewer capacity to meet the service demands that will accompany new growth. Ensure the town has adequate staffing levels in all departments to carry out their missions and efficiently enact town policies. Develop public facilities that enable the town to effectively carry out its mission of public service. Number 9, we will work diligently with our partners in law enforcement and emergency services to ensure that Jamestown has the resources to maintain a high level of public safety for our residents. Maintain a strong law enforcement partnership with Guilford County. Ensure that the town's contracted protection service has adequate resources to meet the community's anticipated need for emergency response. Ensure that residents of Jamestown have access to timely and high-quality emergency medical care. Mitigate hazards to the community from both natural and man-made sources through the adoption and enforcement of adequate public safety regulations. Number 10, Jamestown is a welcoming and inclusive community that values the benefits and diversity in all aspects of the town and its residents. Expand the capacity of the town and its partners to provide opportunities for community-focused social events that bring people from all walks of life together. Develop and encourage participation in new activities and organizations that foster civic engagement. Promote the development and retention of a wide range of housing types that meet the needs of future and current residents of all ages, abilities, family compositions, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Ensure that the residents of the ETJ are included and consulted on matters that affect their neighborhoods, and encourage their participation in the social and civic life of Jamestown. Number 11, the quality of health of the natural environment is as important to our community as the quality of the built environment, and we will work to preserve and protect these vital resources. Protect and preserve mature trees and tree stands from removal in conjunction with land development activity, and promote the growth of healthy forests in the community. Protect riparian areas from the encroachment of development to preserve water quality and natural habitats. Protect contiguous and connected tracts of open space from development to preserve wildlife habitat. Protect the environment and provide passive recreation opportunities. And retain the town's designation as a tree city through the Arbor Day Foundation. Finally, guiding principle number 12. Our local transportation network will move people and goods throughout the community in a context-sensitive manner that prioritizes safety over speed, provides significant internal connectivity, and facilitates access to the regional network. Utilize the opening of the Jamestown Bypass to reimagine the role of Main Street with a focus on enhancing its safety and comfort for cyclists and pedestrians through measures such as reducing the speed limit through the core of town. Improve Jamestown residents' access to regional transportation options, continue to work with the North Carolina Railroad on improving the safety of town's rail crossings, and ensure the new development provides adequate internal and external transportation activity and provides reasonable mitigation of traffic impacts. So, as many of you remember, this started last September 2021 with a community visioning process. town hired urban designer Seth Harry to facilitate a community outreach process to provide objective alternatives for visual preferences. All of these sessions were recorded and shared online, as well as in person. There's an opportunity to participate in person or fill out the same surveys online. Mr. Seth Harry is here tonight to give an overview of how this proposed project compares to community input that was given. And what I've mentioned time and again is a development agreement. So a development agreement, as defined by the school government, refer to the contracts that vest the rights to develop a specific project for an extended period of time, subject to the terms and conditions specified in the agreement. They vest rights in the existing regulations applicable to a specific parcel to the mutual benefit of the landowner and the public. Because this is a huge, complicated, and long, but very, very important process, I'd like to invite the town's land use attorney, Tom Terrell, to the podium to give an overview of the included draft agreement in your agenda packet.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks, Anna.
Tom?
Good evening, Mayor Montgomery and members of council. It's always been a pleasure to stand here and to represent the town of Jamestown. Matthew Johnson and I had a conversation a few days ago, and we were trying to estimate the amount of time and the amount of energy that it has taken so far to do this right. And we estimate that the time spent by you, spent by staff, spent by citizens, spent by D.R. Horton, spent by your consultants, by their consultants, by citizens who have come and spoken into this process, not only reaches into 1,000 hours, but thousands of hours to get this right. It has been a long process. Your staff and I also recognize that even with the best laid plans, the development agreement that is available for you to look at this evening will still be undergoing some changes. It's hard to match up the time period required for public comment by the general statutes with the process of a very arduous and detailed review of your statutes and your manuals and other things, contracts that you have with other entities, which I think Mr. Isaacson will discuss some tonight to get a flavor of what has been involved with this. But everyone who wishes an opportunity to speak will have every opportunity required by statute for public input after what we consider to be a final draft has been posted to the town's website. Now, to go into the development agreement, I think some history would be informative. This property has been discussed by the town of Jamestown for years, and probably, I think Ms. Wolf will say probably decades, the town has had its eye on this property and has known that at some point that this property would be developed by somebody. I can tell you with strong confidence that Greensboro regrets that it gave you control of this property several years ago. If this property were being developed in the city of Greensboro, it would be a one-and-done trip to the zoning commission where none of the requirements, none of the controls that you have now negotiated with D.R. Horton would be implemented. The previous application that the town recently rejected was little more than a mass-graded, vinyl-sided, cul-de-sac-heavy subdivision with minimal landscaping, minimal sidewalks, minimal open space, and very few handcuffs on the types of commercial that were planned off of Guilford College Road. After the denial of that rezoning, and after fighting off attempts to have the land taken from Jamestown's jurisdiction, a fight that occurred at the state level, interim manager Dave Treem and his staff met several times with D.R. Horton representatives. The result of those meetings was a letter of understanding that made a very simple point. If D.R. Horton could make numerous compromises and numerous sacrifices to improve the quality of this development, the town staff could recommend a low density of 3.2 units per acre. It's very important to note that in urbanized areas, this is not a county, a rural county, in urbanized areas, 3.2 units per acre is considered low density in the world of land use planning. High Point, for example, says up to 5 units per acre is low density. That is typical. Contrary to what citizens are being told by some who are in opposition here tonight, density is always calculated on the gross land mass and not on the net developable area. So don't be fooled by that if you hear something contrary this evening. It is also important to note that the same letter of understanding that was written to D.R. Horton by former interim manager Treem was very clear. Staff's recommendation of 3.2 units per acre would not create an obligation of any kind on the town council. It is a point that we made then, and it is a point which I have made to you at many times along the way. It was also clear that the town expected D.R. Horton to participate in the negotiation of a development agreement that went well beyond what was required and well beyond what was laid out in the town's ordinances. Now, Ms. Haverlock spoke very briefly about development agreements, but let me give you sort of a high-level overview. They have only been available as a tool to manage growth since 2005, when our General Assembly, after a lot of lobbying by people like me and others in this process, realized that they actually could create this type of vehicle. What a development agreement does is to create a common table where a town staff, citizens, and the developer can sit and have very careful, considered discussions of how land should be developed. Otherwise, what you have is the chaos of a developer only speaking to staff and coming to a public hearing where everything is decided, which could change the character and the functionality of a town forever, based on 15 minutes for one side and 15 minutes for the other. Importantly, the way that statute was written, just because a common table was established so a developer could speak to you and staff and others, it did not in any way eliminate or cut out the public input. In fact, it requires public hearings on the process after the same type of notice as you would for a zoning map amendments. Development agreements by statute assume that a project will be built over time. They assume that a development will be built in phases. They assume that a development will have complex issues related to public services and complex issues related to the transportation network and how the new development is properly integrated from a transportation standpoint. As we started this process, you have heard me say this many times, D.R. Horton is handicapped. They are not a custom builder. D.R. Horton is what is called a production builder. And not only are they not a custom designer, but they are a production builder that is publicly traded. So they have pressures on them that most developers don't have. But being a production builder is their business model. It's based on the rapid acquisition of land. It's based upon having identical homes, identical townhomes, identical apartments, so that they can calculate and they know precisely how many nails, precisely how many 2x4s, precisely how many linear feet of copper wire are required for each model. And it's in this type of uncommon precision for being able to project their cost and with the unrivaled velocity with which they can build their product, that they are, if not the largest builder in the country, they are one of the largest builders in the country. They create products that are affordable for the market where they are. Any departure from this business model creates hurdles for a company like D.R. Horton, many of which have to be elevated to their headquarters in Texas. I tell you this to give you a background to explain why it's harder for a company like D.R. Horton to negotiate a product like this. But I'm going to describe for you some successes nonetheless. The multiple changes the town demanded of D.R. Horton, I will show you in a minute, were not easy. An outsider who does not participate in the details of real estate development might not get this. And as I have explained to you from this podium before, we experienced resistance. It was unexpected resistance from the company. They even attempted a second time to have the property taken out of your jurisdiction. I don't think the citizens know, Mayor Montgomery, how hard you personally and the council members fought to keep that from happening. A lot of this was done behind the scenes, but it was a fight that was successful. It's all public record. It's not anything that was hidden. But we are now working cooperatively. I am pleased to be able to say that. We don't agree on everything, but we're working seriously. We are working cooperatively. We are working at night, and we are working on weekends. Mr. Isaacson and I have had more telephone conversations after 8 o'clock in the evening, I think, than we've had during the day. I want to publicly thank Ryan Moats. Mr. Moats has probably spent his entire life on this project for the last several weeks. I want to thank Brad Yoder, also of D.R. Horton. Their engineer, Rob Dissinger, and Mr. Blanchard have had quite a few conversations on matters that you're going to hear tonight aren't as simple as meets the eye. And of course, Mr. Isaacson is somebody who is one of the best attorneys anywhere for helping to get a project like this to a point where everybody can say yes. Now, of course, D.R. Horton has agreed to numerous changes, partially because of your constant pressure and input. And I think that is something that has made a huge difference. Now, if this development agreement is eventually adopted, it is going to be the most hybrid form of a production builder product and a custom product that I have ever seen. It will be done under a 40-year term that should create a sustainable, higher quality community that was consistent with our initial letter of understanding. Now, let me talk to you about the citizen input that we had in this process. Former interim manager David Treem realized accurately that this was the largest project that had ever happened in the town of Jamestown. And he did not sit idly and take that for granted. We had several discussions, and under Mr. Treem's leadership, we brought in Mr. Seth Harry, who is, by anyone's calculation, he is one of the nation's most prominent land use planning, urban land use planning consultants. He is here with us this evening. Mr. Harry conducted in this room what sometimes is called a charrette, what he called a public visioning process, where everybody in Jamestown was invited to come and to participate. Many of the designs and many of the requests originating from that input have been incorporated into the development agreement that you're going to be hearing more about tonight, including the concept of rear-loaded homes. I don't know if D.R. Horton has ever done that anywhere in the galaxy, but they're certainly going to be doing it here in Jamestown along the main entrance road. The pedestrian sheds have been identified where there will be functional open space in them. Much better landscaping, elements of human connectivity, protection of Jamestown's history, and numerous architectural enhancements. And despite these many concessions by D.R. Horton, the company still remains a production builder. And we have tried to respect that. We have tried to acknowledge that because this is who they are, and they have come a great distance to meet you where you are. Let me go into some of the key architectural and design elements that are going to be required here. Under the current draft, and I'll emphasize the word current draft of the development agreement, this is where we are. Number one, no vinyl-sided walls. This was a game changer in our conversations. We have had numerous meetings, some sitting in this room at this table, some at the conference room over in Town Hall. But D.R. Horton has agreed not to build vinyl-sided homes or townhomes. Many citizens and each of you expressed concerns about this being what is called a vinyl village. And I stood here at this podium and I put photographs on this screen that show problems, and I'm going to show you some more of those in a minute, of all the seams, the buckling, the vinyl pulling off, and how that looks. Now, they can still use vinyl siding for soffits, for fascia boards, and for eaves, those elements like that, but the walls and what you would see cannot. Those walls have to be stone, they have to be brick, or instead of vinyl, they would have something called cementitious boards, which everybody commonly knows as hardy plank or hardy board, which is a very common building material. Now, on landscaping, instead of no trees at all, or these little small skinny trees, occasionally and randomly planted, D.R. Horton now has to plant a combination of understory or canopy trees in the yards to create the type of landscaping that gives a community that livable, breathable feel. They have to be of native or indigenous species plants that are on a list approved by the town. The streets will have sidewalks on both sides. That is a huge deal when it comes to the walkability and the connectability of a neighborhood, and they have to be a minimum of 5 feet in width to create a real functionality, and those sidewalks have to go out and connect to Guilford College and Mackey roads. Homes will have garages in the rear on the main entrance. As I had said earlier, there will be 15,000 square feet of functional open space within every quarter-mile pedestrian shed. And if you recall a previous council meeting where I showed you pictures of some of the D.R. Horton subdivisions where the home at the end of the row on the corner would have no windows whatsoever, or it was the entire side wall that had a very small window like this, we have said that can't be. And the requirement now in the development agreement is for 15% of that end unit wall to be in windows, shutters on the windows, and you have to have windows on both sides, on the bottom and top floors. Street lights have to be decorative, no curb or lighting, and they have to be close enough so that they actually provide protective lighting at night. The scenic corridors have been protected in ways that are not fully mandated by your LDO, including very defined berms, including vegetative standards, window shutters on the rear of buildings that can be seen from the homes facing Guilford College. As to utilities, this may be something that we have to have another full meeting to go over, but we're getting there. Commitments on basic utility services are complicated. Jamestown does not own its water. Jamestown does not own its wastewater treatment facility. It does not own its own police force. Jamestown does not own a landfill. It has contracts with other municipalities to provide these services. It does provide residential trash pickup. And D.R. Horton, as a responsible developer, has to know that it can be served. It cannot make the commitment of building on this project unless it knows that it has police, unless it knows it has water, sewer, the very basics. So in this context, the town has made numerous assurances to D.R. Horton that it can be served by all of these utilities. These assurances include agreements for the town to make improvements to the water and sewer infrastructure. It includes dedication of treatment capacity, and Mr. Blanchard has worked very closely with their consulting engineer on some of the remaining items that we're still trying to work out. Now, the expenses to be incurred by the town for water and sewer infrastructure upgrades had to be made anyway. I haven't been to these utility lines, but I've seen photographs. And eventually, these upgrades had to be made, and they had to be made at your expense. What this project does is it accelerates the timeline of when these expenses will be. On transportation, they have to do 100% and no less of every recommended change that is in the traffic impact study. And I think all of you are aware that they have to pay for 3/4 of the cost of a trash truck. This is not insignificant. These new trash trucks can cost up to $500,000. When you try to price these today, it takes about a 2-year delay to have one to your specs sent. And the only way they were able to do this is because of numerous concessions and obligations made by the town, all of which are enumerated in this agreement. All of those concessions, in my opinion, in my experience, are very reasonable. In the commercial area that's along Guilford College Road, it now has several guardrails that just did not exist with the Diamondback investment project. I'll list very few of them. First, there's a 32,000 square foot limitation of how much can be built there. Large box retail cannot be built. There are quite a few large box retails that can be built at 32,000, but we have written in that the largest unit can be no more than 6,500 square feet, and only one. And then we have written in a second one can be 2,500 square feet, and then it goes down from there to encourage a small town feel, small shops that would serve a neighborhood and serve a community. The only uses allowed are those uses that are allowed in the Main Street zoning district or the Main Street periphery district. In the last few days, a couple of you have requested to see a list of what's in that, and excuse me, there actually might be a whittling down of some of those uses to make sure that 100% of those uses are ones that you and citizens would have comfort level in that location. I'm going to move to apartments. Having multifamily is one of the ways that D.R. Horton can pay for its cost and concessions that the town has required D.R. Horton to make. Anytime you increase your expenses, you have to increase your income. This is basic economics, but there are a few things I do want to point out on the area for the apartments. First is, There was a rumor that was circulating recently about all of the apartment traffic that would go into the Fox Hollow subdivision. I will say it as loudly as I can, that has never been a public access back to Fox Hollow, never. From the very beginning, this was planned to be an access point that is locked and an access point only available to emergency services who needed an alternative way in or out. The apartments will be built on a parcel that is approximately 5% of the landmass, just 5%. They will not be in a prominent location like they were with Diamondback. They will be much farther off of the road. I don't think that they're going to be visible or easily visible because between Guilford College Road and the apartments, there are streams that still, where trees must be left, but I have asked for some clarification on that point. The same or similar architectural standards will also be in place on the apartments. And although there are a few points in the agreement to be resolved, D.R. Horton has come so far in where we have demanded that they come, that your staff and I recommend to you that the 3.2 unit per acre total density that includes an apartment component should be allowed. And we stand by that as a strong recommendation. There are, again, still a few issues to be resolved, but I want to show you some examples of what we've done. If you look on the left, upper left, that's from our D.R. Horton subdivision, where it looks almost like a barn somewhere. It does not look like a home. In the bottom left-hand corner, you see vinyl siding peeling off. In the middle, you see where it's buckling. In the photo on the right, and I had showed you these before, that is very prominent vertical seams that prevent this from looking like a traditional wood-constructed home. But if you look at the one that is, and I'll walk up to it, right here, that is an example of high-quality cementitious board or hardy plank. On landscaping, the tree in the left, sometimes these are derisively referred to as Charlie Brown trees. They are small, they're skinny, they don't get tall, and they're not prominent. And as I said earlier, they're occasionally and just randomly planted. But in the photographs to the right, you have examples of what is called an understory tree, and in the top right, a canopy tree, all of which would have to be from a list that is approved by the town. This is an area on the left for sidewalks to show you where the sidewalks would be on Guilford College, and then in the right hand, it shows you how wide a 5-foot sidewalk is. In many old neighborhoods, you have 3.5 or 4-foot sidewalks where 3 people can hardly walk, and sometimes 2 people cannot easily walk. 5 feet is now a very good standard. I mentioned earlier that there are some rear-loaded homes. That's not a very common term. What it means is instead of having that very prominent garage in the front of a home, you switch the garage around to the back, and you have an alleyway in the back where trash trucks can come to the alleyway and all other services come behind. So what you see is something like what is on the left or right here. That came, by the way, that came out of the Seth Harry discussions. The left-hand image shows you the pedestrian sheds, and the right gives you an idea of what an open space would be, 15,000 square feet. It's large enough for children to play soccer, to throw a Frisbee, things like that. Again, this is a picture of the end unit to show you one building that has one window on the first floor only, and to the right, it's a better example of how a home will look more permanent when it has windows more prominently fixed. Decorative street lighting on the left, they have to be full cutoff. That is it's a technology that prevents light from going up or out, and instead it is directed downward so that you have foot candles that don't stray onto property where it ought not stray. Scenic corridors, you see on the right is an example of what a berm with vegetation would be. That is illustrative, but I think it's very close to what the development agreement would require. And then in the left-hand side, you see where the scenic corridor is that would have these types of protections. Before I sit down, I would like to turn to the issue of citizen input one more time, and I won't be long. D.R. Horton is not here tonight with a contract to purchase this land. D.R. Horton owns this land. They own the entire 467 acres. It has rights to do something with this property. And since the town does not own the land, and since the town is not the one who would be spending the tens of millions of dollars to develop it, the town is limited in its powers and its authority by statute and by its own zoning ordinance as to what the town can do to manage or have input into this process. Now, I will say that after the Diamondback fiasco, the town has become very aggressive by anyone's yardstick, using every single power granted by statute and every single process allowed by your local ordinance to make sure that the results are as well-planned a community as is possible. In my 37 years practicing law, 30 of which have been focused almost exclusively on land use and zoning, and that includes work in every corner of the state and neighboring states, I cannot think of another example where a town has been as aggressive as the town of Jamestown and as you have been in creating platforms for citizen input on this project. That input began during the last rezoning that was denied. It actually began before that, but it certainly took off during the last rezoning, which was denied. And when D.R. Horton stepped in, you hired this country's one of their leading urban planners to assist with the plans and concept. When he came here, his presence and the ability to attend those meetings was well publicized. Everybody was invited to attend. Nobody was turned away. And anybody who wanted to participate the entire time had the door open to them, and nobody had their voice squelched in the process. It was not just a false exercise because the fingerprints of citizen input are all over this development agreement. Now, did the citizens have the final say on everything? No. That would not be reasonable to expect. But I challenge anybody in the room tonight to show me one development of this size or any size where public input, citizen input, has been as great as this one. The potential for input extended over the course of the last 8 months after the public visioning sessions took place. Every time there was a development agreement draft. It was posted to the website. You have had public hearings. Those public hearings were properly noticed. The citizens and you have had a lot of updates. I have provided updates from this podium. The local Jamestown newspaper has given this project lots of column space and gave it excellent coverage. But I just noticed that in the last week, social media releases under what appear to be just a very small number of citizens have made numerous inaccurate, unfair, and what I personally consider to be some bad faith accusations against the fairness of this process. So I want to make this point as clearly as I can before I sit down, that not a single city, not a single town, not a single county in the entirety of the Piedmont Triad has ever in its history offered as much citizen participation on a project like this. And I cannot name one project where citizen and staff input on architectural design, street layout, open space, functionality of access, and other input has actually made its way into the real plans of a project of any type of real estate development. Now, it is my job, it is staff's job, it is your job to listen to everything that citizens say here tonight. And if I hear something that I think is new and valid, I will actually consider it. If it's feasible, I will do everything I can to see that it is put into the development agreement. But I don't accept the inaccurate and false accusations that this process has been rushed, that the process was unfair, that citizens were left out, or it was not transparent. So, Madam Mayor, I'm going to close. I'm glad to answer any questions. I apologize for the length, but if I can answer questions, just please let me know.
Any questions, council?
Not at this time.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Mr. Harry, would you come to the podium and speak about the public engagement process?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council. The public process that we undertook a little over a year ago, September of last year, followed a format that we've used with a number of communities that we found to be very, very effective for both soliciting input and then translating that input into a set of for lack of a better word, guiding principles, which both informs the ongoing development of the plan in a way that we can, through an iterative steps, we can put that plan back in front of the community to ask them whether or not what they told us, what we heard is what in fact they intended to communicate to us, and that communication was reflected in the plan. So it was a 4-day process. I led a consultant team. It was in the middle of COVID, if you'll remember. And so normally we do this purely as an in-person process, but because of the fact that we were dealing with COVID, we did a hybrid process that involved both in-person and an online opportunity to participate. And we used tools specifically designed to both facilitate that and also to document the findings. Excuse me. In starting this process, it's a 4-day process. We normally start with just a kind of a review of general planning principles that would be relevant and applicable to this particular property. As our starting point, we had two contemporary models of community development formats to use to solicit input from the community, sort of a conventional post-war model, and then a more recent model, sort of neighborhood-based model, which is consistent with the language in the comprehensive plan which Anna referred to earlier, and we use that as a starting point for soliciting community input. That input was recorded through a survey process, both in person and online, and then at the following pinup iterative presentation, we would not only be presenting how those plans were interpreted by our team and developed in the ongoing conceptual planning process, but also to, again, confirm that what we heard was correct and consistent with the general consensus within the community, and that it was reflected in the plan. And then we use the additional input from those pinups to continue to refine the plan as we went. Those findings are available online on the town's website, as well as the breakdown of the specific component pieces that were evaluated and recorded. Because, again, we were kind of comparing two different development formats to solicit specific input and preferences from the community, we focused on features that were common to both community types, but distinct in terms of how they were expressed, and asked very, very specific questions that were suitable and appropriate for both the inline and the in-person process. So from that, and this has been the basis, but essentially the point of reference in terms of our own internal conversations and evaluation of the progress that's been made over the last 12 months with regard to continuing to evolve the plan and again, elicit additional input and from both the community and the council. I think we have that up there, do we not?
Spin the wheel.
Okay. And because the town has its own set of guiding principles, which Anna referred to earlier, I've kind of relabeled these summary of consensus findings. But basically, as we went through the process, with each additional pinup, we took the findings from the previous meeting and we characterized them in terms of the specific items that we were asking the community to comment on. These included overall community structure in the form of either, conventional suburban development or, again, sort of this pedestrian shed-based framework, internal connectivity, how different parts of the neighborhood are able to communicate and to connect internally within the project, external connectivity to the surrounding larger community and neighborhoods, and road infrastructure, block sizes, which are very specific to walkability and community character, street design, again, the notion of creating pedestrian-friendly streets, how the houses relate to the streets, many of the things that Mr. Terrell spoke to earlier, the mix and allocation of unit types overall within the project overall and within each of the individual pedestrian sheds, location of open space and civic functions within each neighborhood, mix of uses, relationship of the project to the larger community context, how well it represents the character of the larger community, and the architectural character and styles. All of those things Mr. Terrell has spoken to already, and the amount of progress that we've made in terms of bringing the applicant along with us and recognizing the value and the importance of these elements to the community, to the residents, and okay. And these were all presented on the conclusion of the presentation of the process. And these are the image on the left is the workshop plan that was produced by my team and the current applicant plan. And when we concluded the process, we were very careful to point out that this has sometimes been referred to as my plan. It's not my plan. It's my team's interpretation of the guiding principles that we elicited from the community over those 4 days, and it represents those principles, and we can speak to them specifically. But if you look at what we also said at that time, that there could be easily another half dozen different plans, very similar in overall structure and form, but distinct from this, that would still also meet those same criteria and guiding principles. So we think in looking at the two and comparing the two plans side by side, you can certainly see elements of similarity in how the applicant's interpretation of those principles are reflected in the consistency in the overall structure of the plan and how it lays on the property. That's a little bit of background on the process itself, how we got here, and the guiding principles that have been informing the subsequent conversations that we've been having, both with the community and with the applicant through staff. And I've been I've been in communication with staff and town council throughout that process, and again, advising them on issues related to these guiding principles. And now I'm available for any questions that the council may have regarding any of that.
None at this time.
Any questions from Mr. Harry?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ed.
Mr. Isaacson? There you are.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. I'm Mark Isaacson. My address is 804 Green Valley Road in Greensboro. I'm here this evening with our team from D.R. Horton, and I'd like to introduce them briefly. With me this evening are two managers with D.R. Horton, Ryan Moats and Brad Mosier, as well as our civil engineer, Bob Dissinger, with Evans Engineering. And I first want to start by thanking the council for your patience. This has been a bit of a long process, as you've heard, and I'm not going to repeat much of what Mr. Terrell and Mr. Harry and Anna have explained to you, but it's complicated. This is a complex piece of property. It's a complex project, and we are still working our way through this to arrive at what we hope will be a very high-quality, affordable, and successful community to add to the town of Jamestown. As you heard, D.R. Horton acquired this property after quite a process last year, and since then we've been working closely with your staff and your consultants to work through the details. And so we have, as Mr. Terrell indicated, I think gotten a lot of traction in the last few weeks. We still have a ways to go. We have some open items that you probably heard about and that I think we have briefed you on from time to time through your staff. And we're continuing to work on those open items. We hope to bring to you soon a definitive development agreement that will encapsulate the items that we've talked about. But we're still working through those. It is a challenging piece of property in the sense it's got a lot of topography issues, a lot of streams, a lot of slopes, access questions, and take any development that you may have seen or may have experienced and put it on exponential scale, and you can imagine the things that we're working through to try to arrive at a very successful project. The PUD ordinance provides the type of flexibility intended to accommodate a large area, such as the Johnson Farm, and allow a creative approach to using time-tested as well as modern principles of development to provide quality housing and amenities to serve future owners of homes in this community. While there are several minimum standards in the LDO that will apply, the PUD allows a mix of housing types to accommodate several types of housing in various parts of this large area of land. For example, D.R. Horton intends to create housing for those buying their first single-family home, as well as what we might call lock and leave townhomes, and some reasonably affordable multifamily homes for primarily younger or downsizing adults. Such a creative approach requires flexibility in the layout and will allow us to pay respects to the history of this property And our team's been working with various consultants, including Shauna Moore as a historical consultant, to do just that. And we anticipate having a community center that will incorporate many elements of the Armstrong House in telling the story of this property, as well as the story of the Johnson family and their ancestors. And we're keenly aware of the importance of telling that story for decades to come. The town's land development ordinance defines a PUD as intended to accommodate a range of uses and to encourage new development and infill development in a manner that accommodates a range of uses while preserving historic development patterns and being sensitive to adjacent districts. Now, in return for greater flexibility in site design, PUDs are expected to deliver exceptional quality community designs that preserve critical environmental resources, provide high-quality community amenities, incorporate creative design in the layout of the buildings and circulation, ensure compatibility with surrounding land uses and neighborhood character, and provide greater efficiency in the layout and provisions of roads, utilities, and infrastructure. So we understand that the council's review of this application is to evaluate the application in light of the purpose of the planned unit development under the ordinance, and to make a decision about the merits of this application in that regard. And we've worked for several months with town staff and consultants to design an application that is supported by the ordinance and that fits within the parameters of the PUD framework. As the staff report indicates, and as you've seen, we have a concept map, and you have a copy of it with you. And I'm going to introduce or ask Ryan and others to walk you through that plan in just a moment. But these uses would include conventional single-family detached homes, attached single-family homes, that is townhomes, multifamily homes, and light commercial uses, as well as a community center that preserves and respects elements of the history of this property, so that residents may continue to learn about the important historical role of this property and the Johnson family and their ancestors and what they played in the development of Jamestown over many decades. And so at this point, I'd like to ask members of our team to come forward and sort of give you a walk through the neighborhood with our concept plan.
Good evening. Make sure that's right. Just got the map up. My name's Ryan Motes. I'm with D.R. Horton. Address is 4150 Mendenhall Oaks Parkway, High Point, North Carolina. Appreciate you all being here tonight. Appreciate y'all having us. I wanted to add two more people to our group here that weren't mentioned, Tim and Jeff with Timmons Group, who have been handling a lot of our engineering, handling the traffic impact studies and site layout. So I just wanted to mention them. So speaking about the property is oriented appropriate as far as northeast, west, south goes. Along the north side of the site there, that is Mackey Road, and then coming along the west side and coming along the south side, that's going to be Guilford College Road. So D.R. Horton incorporated many concepts of the designs from the public meetings into the site layout, including adding rear load homes, mixing housing types throughout the site, incorporating large areas of open space, designing a custom amenity center inspired by local history, and incorporating community-scale commercial uses. There are 6 types of homes in this community, from townhomes to single-family homes, both rear-loaded and front-loaded, to age-targeted freedom homes, and also multifamily. This truly will be a community where a person may live in Jamestown from every and through every stage in life. The preservation and layout of the natural resources on this property create an opportunity to provide exceptional living, with the vast majority of the homes being surrounded and backing up to mature forest. You can see, not so much from afar, but there are huge areas that are going to be preserved and untouched throughout this process. So there will be huge areas surrounding each one of these homes that are going to be mature forest. There are also massive open spaces and amenities, along with smaller open space and areas scattered throughout. we're over 100 acres of open space on this property. There's also going to be neighborhood scale commercial elements that will allow our residents and others to shop and enjoy their coffee or whatever the case may be, and enjoy the views without the need of getting into a car. I do want to mention just a few special notes. Tom had mentioned the access point on Hunt Chase, and I think he described it well. It will be an emergency access connection. It will be gated, it will be locked, it will only be used in the event of an emergency, not only for the development on our site, but also to provide emergency access for the adjacent community. And I also want to note that, you know, I know this layout is public, and so a lot of people have put eyes on it. And as far as the residential homes, the residential homes are generally where they're going to be. And down in that southeast corner, that is where. I'll be there. Okay, you're going to point for me, nice. So that's all right. That's where the apartments are going to be over there. Now, the area up front, where it's going to be the amenity center and the commercial area, there are some elements in there, and there are some layouts of those buildings that aren't. They're more placeholders than anything. So I just wanted to kind of note that where there's parking in front of the amenity center, I really envision the amenity center up front and the parking more towards the rear. Just to make sure that we bring that big, beautiful building up front so that everyone can see it when they're driving by. And also the commercial area right in there. Those buildings are kind of set back in the parking lot. I'd rather see the same kind of thing, bring those buildings up front, give them a more pedestrian scale where people can walk along sidewalks and have immediate access to the buildings as opposed to having to walk through a parking lot. But that's where those things are going to go, so we're not looking to shift them anywhere on site, but I just wanted to mention that the layout that you're seeing there is not final. And other than that, that's pretty much all I have. Do you guys have any questions?
Any questions at this time?
No.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yep. Anything to add, Bob? No? All right, you good? Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a few comments to finish up. I think it's fair to say that North Carolina, and more specifically our Triad area, are experiencing a significant demand for new housing, with many people relocating to this area. How do we meet that demand? With reasonably affordable and quality housing. I would submit to this council that we're fortunate to have a company such as D.R. Horton as the owner of this property. While it's known as a national production builder, D.R. Horton's also known for thinking outside the box when it comes to developing residential communities across the country. This company bought this land with a vision of creating a unique community here, one that will stand the test of time and maintain the high standards that Jamestown has set for decades. As I mentioned, the PUD ordinance sets up a framework within which to plan and implement a customized development that meets the goals, policies, and objectives of the land development ordinance. And I would add that this process is just the beginning of a long road in this community and the development of this property. After council's decision, hopefully a favorable decision, we will be submitting our plans to no less than 4 separate governmental agencies for further approvals, including NCDOT, NCDEQ, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and Guilford County as well. So there are plenty of checks and balances on the development of this property in addition to your review and deliberation. We contemplate a well-coordinated network of streets and sidewalks with many open spaces and natural areas to take into account the several streams, slopes, and floodplain areas on this property, as well as the scenic corridors in this area. By way of contrast, if we were here asking for a conventional single-family detached community, I would submit that we would not have the kind of flexibility that the ordinance offers in a PUD, and that's why we filed the application accordingly. Tom mentioned the development agreement, and I'm not going to repeat the detail that he gave you, which was very helpful and I'm sure informative, but I would divide the development agreement into two basic categories. One is regulations, and the other has to do with capacity. And so we're working our way, and have been working diligently with Paul and Matthew and Anna and others to work through the application of those two categories. That's really what it basically boils down to, is regulations, and you heard a lot about architectural standards and principles, and capacities. Now, those are two key aspects of the agreement that we're continuing to work through. And essentially, the example that I gave to staff the other day was, picture yourself sitting at your desk, and we have 3 monitors in front of us. One has the land development ordinance, one has the technical standards, the other has the development agreement. And we are charged with applying all of those in this matrix to get it right. We would prefer to get this right on the first run and not have to return to you for repeated modifications or amendments, because what we're really doing is trying to forecast. And I don't envy the engineers in this case, trying to forecast what we're going to find as we start in on the unenviable process of developing this property. So we're trying to forecast the future of what this property, how it will play out in this development agreement. And I think that when you know, good lawyers, I was taught, ask what if. They ask a lot of what ifs, and that's what we've been doing, asking what if. We're aware that the town is subject to third-party agreements, as Tom mentioned, and we have those agreements, and so we are incorporating those and some what-ifs about those agreements into this development agreement. And I hope you all can appreciate the complexity that that raises as we sort of vet through that, those details. In concluding, I can tell you that we intend to keep up a vigorous pace in reaching a mutual understanding in this development agreement to return to you with something that we hope you will favorably consider. And I would be happy to answer any questions, and I know members of our team will, but I know you also have some other folks that want to discuss this with you. We appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Any questions, council?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Isaacson. Before I open the public hearing, I'd like to read a statement from the council. What has been called the Johnson property has been a point of public discussion for several years. Active plans to develop this tract started 2.5 years ago with Diamondback Investment, whose rezoning application this council unanimously rejected. When D.R. Horton placed this property under contract, we began a slow and deliberate process to discuss hundreds of details related to this land, primarily in the context of a development agreement that included public input from the workshops with our planning consultant, Seth Harry. As we approach the end of a 15-month discussion, we have been routinely reminded by our legal team and our planning consultants and staff of how complex and enormous this process is. One item of utmost importance is matching up the state of North Carolina public notice requirements with a reasonable prediction of when we have a development agreement that is essentially complete. Our attorneys have advised us that we likely will need yet another public hearing properly timed after a completed draft of the development agreement has been placed on our website. So if your concern is not having had a chance to review the final development agreement, this has been addressed and remedied. Public hearings are organized in a way to gather public opinions and concerns on issues before a legislature, agency, or an organization makes a decision or takes action. We want to hear from each of you tonight and at any further public hearings that we call concerning the annexation, rezoning, and development agreement. At this time, I'd like to open the public comment period, the public hearing to the public, and if anyone would like to speak, please come to the podium, state your name, your address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Madam Mayor, if I may, before we go to that, if Beth has anything that she would like to add at this point, I'd like to hear from our town attorney. If not, then move straight forward with that.
Okay.
I appreciate that, Councilman, but I'm anxious to hear the public comments, and I think we should move on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jamestown Council and Mayor. My name is Denise Murphy. I live at 3821 Hunt Chase Drive in Greensboro, which is the extraterritorial Jamestown. And first off, I'm very glad to be able to speak here. I've been very happy with the receptivity of the town council, you mayor, Anna, I've greatly, the town planner, all of you have been very responsive to my questions. I've met with Anna, I've spoken with Mr. Capes, so I have to say I was highly impressed with that. Now, I will say, when I heard that Johnson Farm was sold, I mean, I knew it was going to happen eventually. I have to say the apartments, and I know probably most people are not happy about that. Now, the thing is that most of the people in here, and hello neighbors and fellow friends, we're the most directly impacted, I really feel, in a lot of things about the development. And that is because Fox Hollow and Hunt Chase Drive, which is where I live, is going to be right next to the apartments. So I have to say the top 3 concerns, and it sounds like 2 of those 3 have been addressed and I'm very, very happy about, and that is the fire emergency exit road that I really hope that is a barrier that people can't just break the gate easily, because that's a concern of both apartment traffic, shortcutting it to Harris Teeter, as well as we were really concerned about trucks barreling down with construction and people couldn't walk. So it sounds like from the discussions that that's 2 things that won't be a concern. The third concern, and again, I'm one representative of Fox Hollow, which has almost 300 houses, has to do with where the apartments will be, and just hoping that a tree, you know, like I know you'll have plans to have trees bordering homes that'll be coming up on Mackey. If there's any way to keep in that barrier trees, we greatly appreciate it, because we're looking at 3-story apartments. That's going to look down directly in people's backyards. So if there's any way for that architectural barrier to be that, we'd greatly appreciate it. With D.R. Horton to think of that as well, we'd love that. Final thing is really noise, is obviously that will help as the noise of construction will be going on. So I just want to say thank you very much. Again, I was very pleasantly surprised on you all meeting with us. Me and other neighbors told me they had meetings with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Excuse me. My name is Jeffrey Craig. I live at 111 Jordan Creek Drive in Jamestown. I live directly across the street from the Johnson property. And I'd like to ask if any of you live adjacent to that property. I assume that's a no? Okay. Your lives won't be affected by this the way our lives will. I came here tonight to represent Jordan Creek. Approximately 125 folks live there. Only 3 of us showed up tonight, and all the people I spoke to this week said they've made up their minds already. This is a done deal, and our say really doesn't have much to do with it at this point. I don't know if that's true. I hope it's not true. I hope you're really listening to the people of Jamestown. You know, I don't see how this will enhance our lives in any way. I always knew it would be developed. There was no question, but we didn't expect a tract builder to come in there. We expected, you know, a nicer type of community that fit in better with the basic vibe, the small town feel of Jamestown, and I think that's what everyone here wants to remain. Now, yes, there have been some improvements. Probably, probably my biggest objection at this point is the commercial area at the corner of Mackey and Guilford College. It is directly across the street from several neighborhoods with probably $400,000 to $500,000 homes. It is going to affect us negatively. The traffic will be unbearable trying to get in and out of those communities. And I don't see how basically doubling the population of Jamestown, how the town will keep up with services. Yes, I heard all that about, making improvements, but it just seems to me it's going to be difficult to keep up with that, and I hope that won't negatively affect the citizens who live here now. So all I ask is that you hold off on the zoning and do not approve the development plan tonight. And I'd like to ask just quickly, in this room, is there anyone else who is against the current iteration of this project? You raise your hand. Please hear us, that's all. Thank you.
Good evening, Chris Marsh, 3757 Hunt Chase Drive, part of the Fox Hollow community. I was pleasantly surprised about the presentation. I really don't have any qualms about the overall building of it. I did have a few questions to, maybe for the council to take under advisement, which would be the fire response plan overall. They talked about the emergency access. Right now, we would get Pinecroft Sedgefield coming, and then Greensboro Fire Department is also contracted. So that would possibly increase apparatuses coming through the neighborhood if this plan was approved. When talking about adding that many homes, I have 2 young kids. We also haven't heard anything about the school systems. How is this going to affect kids going to school, bus routes, increased classroom size, things of that nature? So I haven't heard anything that has been put out as far as that. I may have heard it wrong, but I heard it was a 40-year project. I may have heard that wrong, but that seems awful long for a project to be. So the construction, I know the gentleman just talked about how it wouldn't affect me as much, but I can see for him, 40 years of construction is an awful long time, and that's just not something that I personally can accept. As far as the public utilities, I know one of the gentlemen were talking about how you guys will outsource a lot of public utilities. With this amount of size of people coming in, or the bigger homes or apartments, I would like to see a plan of how we're going to be able to afford bringing in all this water or trash, just public utilities, because I haven't seen a plan that would be able to sustain all of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Turvo, 2 Langholm Court, Whittington Hall. Just a couple of things, I guess. I consider Jamestown not urban. I'm not quite sure where we would fall, but not urban. And so Mr. Terrell mentions 3.2 units per acre. If I use his math in the same acreage, 313 acres, I did the math on this, and I add the apartments, which are part of the acres, the 313 acres that he's using, all right? Instead of a 3.2 units per acre, it goes up to 4.7. Well, I know that's not fair because they go this way rather than that. But think about the fact that, okay, if the numbers are basically correct, what we're adding, which other people have referred to, is 1,500 homes, residences, families. 3,000 cars, which I think is a lot. And although it's, might be fine for urban traffic, it's going to cause some heavy lifting on the likes of Mackey Road, as well as Guilford and Guilford College, I believe. The other thing is a really small point, and I don't know whether or not the council can even talk specifically about the rear-loaded houses. I've seen that in a fairly new development down in Charlotte. Two problems exist. First of all, human nature. People don't use the back to park. All right, so what they do is they park in front, and now to get through, one car has to do this, and if there are two cars, one car absolutely has to stop. The second thing that I saw executed were the driveways behind the houses to the alleyway are too short. And what happens is you can't park your car in the driveway. So now, again, multiplying the problem is where you're going to park your cars during the daytime anyway. So, those are really my main concerns. If I were king, I would probably say this development is well planned, well thought out, well negotiated, except the apartments. Adding 500 units. Now, also, I guess the last point is one of their spreadsheets, which were really tough to read on the computer, give alternatives that would lead to more commercial or apartments or some other thing that is unstated. And I guess I'm cynical, I'm suspicious, but please be aware.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have anyone else that'd like to speak at this time?
Council, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to express some of the concerns that I have, as well as the rest of the community. I think it's pretty clear.
I'm sorry. Did we get a name and a...
Oh, I'm sorry, Brent Ayers and 2120 Guilford College Road.
Thank you.
I think it's pretty clear that many of our neighbors have legitimate concerns about schools and infrastructure and roads and access and other things like that. And while a lot of these questions are tough, it's not really acceptable to say, we don't control those things, so we can't consider them in the way that we vote. We kind of have to, you have to understand those concerns and understand whether they're deal breakers. One need not look too far to find class action lawsuits and complaints and Better Business Bureau filings and other concerning risk factors about the way that this builder delivers products. We saw pictures of vinyl siding and stuff like that. Oh, we're not going to use vinyl siding. Workmanship's still the same, though. We seem to turn a blind eye to that. We say, well, they haven't left us with a major problem yet. And I genuinely think that, thank you folks for addressing some of those concerns in the development agreement. But somehow we're willing to give them a green light and to double the size of our town. And with what I fear, in 20 years, be a bunch of ramshackle shacks and apartments that won't match the rest of our community. And after all, it's hard to stop a train once it starts building. We have to have better control. And I think the more sensible solution is to listen to the community and know that we stand behind you to reduce the density and monitor the construction and keep our community small but vibrant. We want these new neighbors to be assets in our community, but reckless growth just isn't responsible. And person after person has told you this. Tom tells us that 3.2 units is low density, and take a drive around Jamestown. That's not what we have here. So I encourage you to do what it takes to come up with an agreement that reduces that density, consider it and to thereby consider our schools, our infrastructure, our roads, the way the people of this town support you in achieving the goal and they have your back if it becomes contentious. This development, the developer's here to make dollars, and sometimes that's at odds with what the community needs. You've all read countless letters and emails and fielded phone calls and and probably been cornered in a grocery store about this. And, no two views are exactly the same, but I encourage you to vote no on the PUD, no on the annexation, until we can avoid irreparably damaging our community.
Thank you.
My name is Greg Strever. I live in 100 Pierce Drive in Weddington Hall. My main concerns are with Guilford Road. My backyard backs right up to Guilford Road. I haven't heard anything about expansion plans with the traffic that's going to be generated with this. I mean, there's times now where we can't even get out of Weddington Hall because of the traffic now, and it just keeps increasing year after year anyway, and putting this additional traffic into this area is going to even cause more problems with Weddington Hall. So, since my backyard goes right up there, are they going to widen the road? How much is it going to take? Things like that would greatly affect my property values and stuff. So that's my main concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have anyone else that would like to speak at this time?
Good evening. My name is Al Stewart. I live at 307 Jordan Crossing Avenue in Jamestown. One of my concerns is the master plan. I've not been able to see anywhere where there is a set-in-stone master plan. It seems to be that the master plan is you vote this in and then they can do anything they want to. I'm really concerned about the fact that it seems to be a fluid document rather than something that you could plan on actually and believe in. I spent 30 years in the police department in Greensboro. I watched what has happened in Adams Farm when they started building too many apartments. Then because of the apartments and the crime that they have that they bring, then you have people selling out and they have rental houses. That's become a high crime area. Jamestown virtually is crime free, and which is the reason I moved here. How many people on these first two rows have ever lived in a D.R. Horton neighborhood? One. Do you live there now?
Please address the council.
Good, and I'm glad to see that. I'm not all that familiar. I know they have a great reputation for production building. They have a pretty good reputation for taking down a lot of trees, too. You ride up and down Jamestown Main Street, and what you see is differences, and you see trees. Part of the reason I moved here. The crime issue is paramount in my mind because I know what that does to neighborhoods. And I'm concerned about a number of apartments. It doesn't take long before you've got junk cars in the parking lots. You've got people, sometimes 12 and 15 people living in a single apartment. That just breeds crime. And that's, in my experience, I just don't want to see Jamestown having to triple the size of the contract with the sheriff's department because they can't handle the crime. Thank you very much.
My name is Sam Nehans. I live at 130 Thora Drive in Jamestown. My question is, what is this going to cost our village in increased taxes, reduced quality of our educational systems? We already have elementary schools with temporary buildings. We're going to add 1,500 residences. Will the taxes that this company pays for those residences offset new buildings, additional staff, all of the services, the public services that we have, which are excellent. I remember the signs along our roads, "Keep Jamestown, Jamestown." Thank you.
How y'all doing this evening? Jeff Williams, 2328 Adams Farm Parkway, Greensboro, North Carolina. I live in the Fox Hollow neighborhood. I am on the board for the HOA out there. We have some questions in regards to this emergency exit. Basically, one is, who's going to maintain it? Because we have a feeling that if it's left up to D.R. Horton or the apartment complex, when this gate is broken, it's going to stay open. And so we have a big concern as to who we're going to call to make sure this gate stays closed just strictly for emergency vehicles. Another issue is we've been told there's going to be a 30-foot buffer starting from the property line to the apartment complex. One issue is that is right where Colonial Pipeline has. So you're going to have an open space for the pipeline and very little trees between us and the apartment complex that they're proposing. So if y'all could look into those two things, we would greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Raymond Ellis. I've lived here 33 years. I'm at 301 Shadow Lawn Drive, Jamestown. I've seen a lot of projects like this come and go. I've been involved in multi-million-dollar projects in Greensboro, Winston-Salem, up to billions. And that kind of explosive growth in this little town right here, it's not going to be explosive and it's going to be drawn out. But still, we're talking about a lot of problems. You're talking about emergency services, water, sewer. I mean, like he said about the gate, all these other issues that everybody else brought up, I second every bit of it. And I can guarantee you, having worked with big contractors from all over the world, the big contractors and big builders are going to cheap out every way they can, and they're going to come ask you for concessions on every little issue, try to make more money and more money and more money, and don't give a whole lot of care to the people that already live here. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Do I have anyone else that would like to speak at this time?
Hi, Trish Kirby, 131 Thora Drive. First off, no, we don't want a big building alongside the road to drive by every day. Input means you have something to say in an outcome. We shared our opinions and no one listened. Nothing in the vision plan matches D.R. Horton's lack of quality, overcrowded housing developments. Their endless list of OSHA and work-related violation and fines and lawsuits should be a warning to all of us. They will bring down the value of our homes and our property value. It will kill our infrastructure and drain our resources, schools, emergency services, and quality of life. Jamestown does not have its own police force, but relies on Guilford County Sheriff's Office Law Enforcement Division 3 and has an office in Jamestown. District 3 services incorporated towns Jamestown, Pleasant Garden, the unincorporated areas of Climax, those neighborhoods outside the city limits of Archdale, High Point, Greensboro, within the city boundaries. Captain Yusuf Sansauer presented an annual report in the crime statistics in Jamestown for 2021 at the February Town Council meeting, stating, "The good thing about Jamestown, it's quiet. It won't be." And one last thing. Worrying about the schools, I'm fortunate my child does not go to a public school. I do not have to worry about the overcrowding. Currently, 42% of the children in elementary school here in Jamestown are proficient in reading, 42%. 49% are proficient in math. The middle school and high school have 44% proficient in reading, 38% in math. Clearly, we can't handle what we have now. Let's do better.
Thank you.
Christina Reeser, 2621 Glass House Road. Per the public hearing documents, the annexation petition is dependent on the rezoning application, and the rezoning petition is contingent on the development agreement. Yet public hearings were first called on an annexation petition before the rezoning application was received and approved, then the rezoning application without the approved development agreement, and finally the development agreement. It seems the town has it backwards. Shouldn't the order of the public hearings go development agreement, then the rezoning application, and finally the annexation petition? The town definitely put the cart way before the horse. Why did the Technical Review Committee approve rezoning application based on the newly approved 2021 comprehensive plan, yet the Planning Board approved the rezoning application on the old version known as the 2020 comp plan? Why is each board using different governing documents for the same properties? The affidavit of notice for the January 25th, 2022 Town Council meeting indicates the notice of public hearing was sent on Jamestown 11, 2022. Is Jamestown 11, 2022 even a valid date and are permitted on a legal document? For the November and January public hearings, 4 Johnson properties are listed. And now on the most recent notice for tonight's meetings, there's 8 properties and very different parcel numbers. Was the rezoning application amended and subject to the Technical Review Committee and Planning Board consideration? How is it that the apartment schematic did not enter the Town Council agenda packet until the September 20th meeting? The current master plan in the development agreement dated today, today's packet, does not show apartments in their schematic. However, Exhibit B2 shows the apartment community schematic. Things don't match up. And then why is the town staff currently misinforming public as the town is claiming? The watershed is called Hunt Chase Water Loop. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak at this time? Seeing none, I'll return to council. Council, do you have any comments at this time?
Well, it just seems to me, I'm sorry, I moved over here so I can see, from what we've heard, that there's still some more work to be done on this development agreement, and I don't see why you would discuss it until you have these other open items that we've been talking about.
Okay.
And so I think the proper thing to do, of course, I don't know about the applicant, we're talking about continuing this public hearing to October the 18th. Is that acceptable to the applicant?
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
I'm not sure what we got going on here.
Councilmember Wolf, the applicant, I think, asked me to respond, but I agree with them that we won't have enough on the 18th for the hearing to be meaningful
Yeah.
and helpful.
Okay.
So,
Do we need to continue it to the November meeting if the 18th will not be acceptable?
well, we don't have a
Is that what
final
we're
draft,
hearing?
so I think we'd need to.
Okay.
The public hasn't seen a final draft.
Right.
A lot of things were brought up tonight that were covered in different conversations. I don't think some folks heard some of the things Terrell said or Mark said that would have cleared up some of the statements, although I do appreciate and absolutely want to hear everything everybody has to say. But we don't have anything to vote on that's
Right.
concrete, so there's no
And we
way I
won't
would
have
want to
anything in
vote.
a week.
Pardon?
We won't have anything in a
That's
week,
right,
which will be the 18th,
Correct.
our next meeting. I'm asking if the council would like to continue this to our
November meeting.
November 15th.
November 15th.
November 15th? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we would want that final draft to be out to the public so that they can see it.
And have ample time.
Yeah.
You need to.
Excuse me, please be quiet at this time so the council can hear one another. Council, please Try to get near your mic. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I would make a motion that we continue this public hearing to the November 15th regular town council meeting at 6 PM in the Civic Center without further advertisement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. At this time, I'd like to call a 10-minute recess, and we will resume with the next public hearing in 10 minutes.
That was it, wasn't it? We don't have another public hearing.
Yeah, we have two more to hear. Anna, did you have any additional information to present concerning the next public hearing?
I do not have any additional information at this time.
Okay. And this will be the consideration for the approval and of the consistency statement. Is that correct?
This is the public hearing on rezoning request.
Okay. Thank you. Tom, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, ma'am, I don't. I do think procedurally, we should have everything tracked together.
We should have everything tracked.
All decisions to be made, the annexation and the rezoning. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Mr. Isaacson, did you have anything you would like to add at this time?
Other than to thank the council for its patience and understanding of, again, the complexity of this matter, and we look forward to continuing to work on this and be back before you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will open this to anyone in the public who would wish to speak concerning the rezoning request. Seeing none, I'll return to council.
I would just make that motion to continue that public hearing to November the 15th in the Civic Center at 6 p.m.
Second.
Without further advertisement.
Without further advertisement?
Yes. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Now moving to the public hearing for the consideration of the development agreement. Any additional information, Anna?
I do not have any additional information.
Council? This time I'll open it to the public. If anyone would like to speak concerning the development agreement. Seeing none, I'll return to council. Council, do I have a motion to continue this hearing also?
I'll move to continue the public hearing to November 15th, regular town council meeting at 6 p.m. in the Civic Center without further advertisement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Madam Mayor, prior to adjournment, Beth, do you have anything you want to add now?
Councilman, thank you again for giving me another opportunity, but I think we've definitely aired the issues out fairly well. As you know, I've gone through the development agreement. I do have some wording changes that are under consideration, so nothing really to add to anything at this time. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.